Yo, what is good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy Podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I am your host. This is episode 49 of the podcast. I'm actually recording this technically on Sunday, October 26th. By the time this is posted, it'll be a few hours into Sunday, and hopefully you can catch this, or the clips at least, before the games kick off. And in this episode, we are going to be getting into week 8 of the 2025 fantasy football season. We're going to be previewing all the games of the week. We got a lot of bye weeks, so a lot of things to go over there. And we're going to recap the Thursday night game that did not go very well for my Minnesota Vikings. And then most importantly, we'll get into this soon, I'm going to get you with my starts of the week, and we never miss here. So make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you are enjoying so that you can become a fantasy football prodigy. And let's start by just quickly recapping this Thursday night game between the Chargers and the Vikings. The Vikings desperately need JJ McCarthy back. I don't know if the guy is good. We've seen 2 full games out of him, but it's got to be better than Carson Wentz, because that was dreadful to watch. The whole offense just couldn't do anything. Carson Wentz, just obviously, he's not the guy. I think we all know that he's on his 6th team in 6 years, and he's definitely injured. He looked like he was in agony at various times in that game. So respect to him for going out there and gutting it out. But yeah, it was nobody on the Vikings really did anything. They only scored 10 points to the Chargers 37. Fall to 3-4, Chargers 5-3. But Justin Herbert was awesome. He was 227 yards on only 25 passing attempts, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. The Vikings almost had a pick 6 very early in that game that maybe could have got us some momentum, but not quite. Kamani Vidal on the ground. Everyone else in the running back room is hurt. Then he looked awesome. 23 for 117 and a touchdown on the ground. Also added 1 for 10 through the air. Jarrett Patterson at running back also got involved. 11 for 30 on the ground, but Vidal looked awesome. And also Herbert added 7 for 62 on the ground. Every time the Vikings would finally, cover everyone up, Herbert would just take off and run for 10 plus yards. So their offense looked good. I will say though, Quentin Johnston, he was the forgotten man here. You're going to have this with the Chargers receiving room because they just have so many weapons with Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston, and now Oronde Gadsden, who has really come onto the scene hot here at tight end. He had another great game. The rookie, 5th round pick, very athletic freak. If you have him in Dynasty, congratulations. He looks like he's going to be a problem. But yeah, when you have this many options in the passing game, there's only one football. So, to start the season, it was kind of where's Ladd McConkey? Now he's been good, and now Quentin Johnston isn't very good. And Keenan Allen has had some disappearing acts. So in the end, McConkey was 6 for 88 and a touchdown on 10 targets, and he had a pretty bad drop in there too, I remember. And then Gadsden, the rookie tight end, 3 really strong games in a row. He saw 5 targets, caught them all for 77 and a touchdown. And then Keenan Allen, 4 for 44 on 5 targets. And then one of the touchdowns did go to rookie Trey Harris at wide receiver. He was 2 for 8 with that touchdown. You would have liked to see that go to, someone that was being started, but whether that be, Keenan or McConkey or Gadsden, or even if Quentin Johnston had 1 catch and maybe it was a touchdown. But yeah, Johnson got goosed, if I didn't mention that. He didn't have a catch. And then, yeah, on the Viking side of things, Jefferson was 7 for 74 on 11 targets. Actually pretty good considering how bad the offense looked. Addison was 3 for 26. He did get a touchdown on 4 targets. I was really torn in a full PPR league between Addison, Mason, and Chase Brown. I ended up going with Addison. It was really, really close. And luckily Addison got that touchdown, but Aaron Jones did return off of IR in this game. So he was 5 for 15 on the ground. Let's see, he was 2 for 15 through the air on 4 targets. And then Jordan Mason, 4 carries for 3 yards. 1 for 3 through the air. So yeah, it was a rough day. TJ Hawkinson had another kind of dud game. He's had a game or 2 this year where he's been okay, but 2 for 26 on 3 targets. So let's get out of that game. Let's move on to the rest of the games of the week here. And actually, first things first, we're going to get into our starts of the week, where I go position by position, and I'm going to give you my top, not really my top play, because, I don't want to tell you hey, start Josh Allen, start Jonathan Taylor, start Christian McCaffrey. That's too obvious. So I'm going to kind of give you These are my starts of the week, guys that I like this week more than usual, or they represent a little more upside than normal. They have a great matchup, yada, yada, yada. So we're going to get into my starts of the week. So quarterback start of the week, Bo Nix of the Denver Broncos at home against the Dallas Cowboys. Nix has had an up and down sophomore season in 2025. Last week against the Giants, he was giving you nothing for fantasy through 3 quarters, then had a monster 4th quarter and finished as the quarterback 1 overall on the week with nearly 40 fantasy points. In that quarter, he showcased his dual threat ability that makes him so exciting for fantasy, getting it done both through the air and on the ground. This week, against a terrible Cowboys defense, I expect him to have more than just one productive quarter. The Cowboys defense is giving up the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks on the season, and as if that wasn't bad enough, they also just put cornerback Trayvon Diggs on IR. This game has the highest over-under of the week at 50.5 points, so there is potential for this game to get crazy if both offenses can put up points. I like Bo Nix as a high quarterback 1 in week 8. And then, of course, staying in that same game, we're going to go from quarterback to wide receiver. I like the potential that this game has to be juicy for fantasy. Wide receiver start of the week, Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos at home against the Dallas Cowboys. Sutton is the wide receiver 21 in points per game on the season, and outside of 2 disappearing acts, he has been really solid for fantasy. I don't see a scenario where he can disappear this week, as he gets to take on a Dallas Cowboys defense that is allowing the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers in the league. Even if J.K. Dobbins and the Denver running game also take advantage of this matchup, the Cowboys defense is bad enough that the Broncos should be able to put up production both on the ground and through the air. This game has a league high 50.5 point over under, so we could get a shootout, which gives Sutton a little bit of extra upside. I like Courtland Sutton as a mid wide receiver 1 in week 8. All right, so piling on to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not going to make J.K. Dobbins the start of the week at running back, but if I didn't go with Bo Nix and Courtland Sutton, I would have gone with Dobbins at running back, but I don't want to do all Denver Broncos. So running back start of the week, Breece Hall of the New York Jets on the road against the Cincinnati Bengals. Breece Hall has been disappointing the last couple weeks, and he has been on the injury report this week, but I still wanted to highlight him as a guy I would try to get in my lineup in fantasy. One key reason Breece Hall has been a bit lackluster for fantasy is the fact that he hasn't scored a single touchdown on the season. Among all running backs, he has by far the most touches without scoring a touchdown on the season, with 118 total touchdownless touches. There's a tongue twister. While the Jets' offense is inept and could again struggle to present scoring opportunities for the talented back, the Jets have a matchup with the Bengals, who give up the most fantasy points per game to running backs on the season. So I'm hopeful we get a good performance from Breece Hall this week. He's been dealing with a knee issue and was limited on Wednesday and Thursday before logging a full practice on Friday. He should suit up, but monitor the news for any injury updates. Assuming he's good to go, I like Breece Hall as a low running back 1 in week 8. And then finally, tight end start of the week, Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers on the road against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kraft is the tight end 5 in points per game on the season, and he has been a yards after catch dog. Fresh off a 10-target game where he put up 5 catches for 58 yards and a touchdown, he gets a matchup with the Steelers, who are giving up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to tight ends. I like Tucker Kraft as a high tight end 1 in week 8. All right, those are my starts of the week. Hopefully you get them in your lineups and they dominate. And don't forget, I am the fantasy football prodigy, so of course I never miss. I never play the wrong guy and get frustrated and want to never play fantasy football again. Anyways, let's move on. We're going to go through all the games coming up this week, game by game, just really quickly, and just kind of preview them, give you some ideas on who to start, who not to start, etc. So we're going to start with the Houston Texans at home against the 49ers. The Texans are 2-4. 49ers are 5-2. 41.5 point over under. The Texans are actually 2.5 point home favorites. It's a little interesting to me that they're favored. I know they are at home, but they're 2-4. The 49ers are 5-2. The 49ers are riddled with injuries, but I think the 49ers are just a better team. You know, the Texans have a good defense, but their offenses look putrid. And the 49ers have been playing decently well, all things considered, with the injuries they've sustained. So I don't know what Vegas knows that we don't. But I don't know. It's a little interesting to me. But for the Texans, Nico Collins at wide receiver is out with a concussion. So is wide receiver Christian Kirk. And then obviously Joe Mixon is still out. So they're going to be very undermanned here. I'm not looking to start Stroud or Nick Chubb. Woody Marks was more involved last week. We've seen him kind of increase his workload and then have it dip back down. But I'm not really looking to start either of them. But if I had to pick one, it would be Woody Marks. Sort of in that like running back 3 range, just with all the bye weeks we have. Oh, I forgot to say, Arizona Cardinals, Detroit Lions, Jacksonville Jags, Las Vegas Raiders, LA Rams, Seattle Seahawks, all on bye. So we got 6 teams on bye. So some people who might not normally be starters might have to start for you. So, you know, no Nico Collins or Kirk. It's going to be Xavier Hutchinson, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Knoll. Dalton Schultz at tight end maybe gets a little more involved, and he's been kind of like a steady Eddie that really hasn't given you much upside. But last week he was okay. I don't really want to start Higgins. If I had to pick one receiver to start, I would probably pick Knoll. But it's pretty gross. At tight end, you could stream Dalton Schultz. He's somewhat interesting with the lack of targets around him. And how did he finish last week? He was 10 targets, 9 for 98. So you can do worse with all these bye weeks in a position that's pretty gross. You know, him and Cade Otton are kind of guys that have stepped up and might be sort of interesting that weren't necessarily the most interesting to start the year. And they're honestly probably slotting in as like low tight end ones at this point, just with how the position is looking. But yeah, it's pretty much... I'm not looking to start any of them except maybe Dalton Schultz in a pinch. And then for the 49ers, they're still dealing with so many injuries on defense and offense. And Brock Purdy is out at quarterback. Ricky Pearsall is out at wide receiver. Obviously, Ayuk is still not back. Jawan Jennings, it looks like he's good to go. So it's going to be Mac Jones starting at quarterback. I'm not looking to start him against the Texans. They have been a brutal, brutal matchup for quarterbacks, giving up the fewest points to quarterbacks on the season. So I'm not touching that, but McCaffrey is obviously an auto start. Even in a tougher matchup, you still start McCaffrey every week. Jawan Jennings, if I had to pick one receiver to start for the 49ers, it would be Jawan Jennings. Texans are giving up the 5th fewest points to receivers, but like I'm in a dynasty league where I'm missing like so many players and I have bye weeks and stuff. So it's like, I'm going to have to start Jawan. And he's the type of player where regardless of the matchup, he could go out and kind of just, you know, PPR his way to like an okay game. And then George Kittle, he came back last week and got goosed. I'm still putting him in the lineup just because it's George Kittle and he represents upside that very few tight ends have. But again, the Texans have a good defense, giving up the 5th fewest points to tight ends on the season. And I believe it is National Tight Ends Day coming up here. So he usually likes to show out for that. But not super excited for this game. Again, it has a 41.5 point over under, which other than the Browns and Patriots looks like it's the lowest on the week. So second lowest on the week. Moving on. We get a rematch here between the Eagles and the Giants. The Giants just took down the Eagles at home. So the Giants were at home last time. This time it's in Philadelphia a couple weeks ago. Giants pulled off the upset. But the Eagles get to host the Giants now. Eagles are 5-2. The Giants are 2-5. I'm still predicting the Eagles win here. They're 7-point favorites according to the DraftKings Sportsbook. 43.5 point over under. Brandon Graham came out of retirement to rejoin that defensive line for the Eagles. He is out, it looks like, so he's not going to play quite yet. And the big injury here for the Eagles is A.J. Brown at receiver is out. He was finally kind of putting it together, and that's unfortunate. But for fantasy, that's going to open things up a little bit more for a guy like Devontae Smith, who he's one of those talented players on this offense where it's like there's just not really a ton of passing work going around. But with AJ Brown being there and with the Eagles not really being a pass heavy team, but with no AJ Brown, I'm way more excited to play Devonta Smith than they otherwise would be. The Giants are, let's see, they're giving up the third most points per game to wide receivers. So even if it's a game script where the Eagles are kind of able to play defense and run the ball, the running game hasn't been as dominant or even as close to as dominant as it was last year. And there's going to be a consolidation of targets where, Devonta Smith is the clear number one. It also gives a bump to, why am I not remembering his name? Dallas Goedert. It's so funny. He was really good for fantasy all season, just kind of based on like fluky kind of touchdown luck, it almost seemed like. And then I feel like people finally bought in against the Vikings in week 7, and he was 3 for 18 through the air. So that's fantasy football in a nutshell. But he should be a decent streaming candidate as like a low tight end one. I'd probably rather play him over like Dalton Schultz, just because the Eagles offense has a little more upside. Honestly, with AJ Brown out, him versus Travis Kelce is honestly a tough call. And with the usage we saw out of Travis Kelce for the Chiefs with Rashee Rice back, I'd probably honestly lean Dallas Goedert in that scenario. So that's kind of where he's at this point. So Goddard and Smith get a bump. Saquon, you're starting against the Giants, even though it hasn't been as good as last year. You still start him, and then Jalen Hurts is an auto start each and every week. So it's pretty easy for the Eagles side of things, honestly. Hurts, Barkley, Devonta Smith is entering like wide receiver 1 territory with the injury in the matchup, and then Dallas Goedert if you don't have like a locked in tight end. And then for the Eagles, Jackson Dart has been interesting for fantasy. Him and Cam Scadaboo they're such fun players to watch. Eagles are kind of middle of the pack when it comes to quarterback points allowed. I'm willing to start him just because of his mobility. He's really using his legs, which is a cheat code for fantasy. He's, a low quarterback 1, high quarterback 2 type of guy. Like if it's like, he's kind of in that category with like Jordan Love, Caleb Williams, even like Joe Flacco at this point with how good he's been playing in Cincinnati. I'd probably go Dart over Flacco. I'd probably go with Dart over Jordan Love. I know Jordan Love has gotten some attention this week as a good kind of low quarterback 1 as well. He's just, I don't know. I just feel like they keep leaning on Josh Jacobs, and he's not needed most of the time. So I would probably lean Jackson Dart because I think he has a little more upside here. Even, obviously with Malik Neighbors not playing, being on injured reserve, Dart has still looked good and has been running the ball. And even though he doesn't really have great weapons to throw the ball to, they do get Darius Slayton back at wide receiver, which I think is going to help this offense a lot. I'm still not looking to start him, but in some deeper leagues or leagues where I'm kind of like riddled with injuries, I did pick Slayton up as someone who might be a flex player moving forward, just because Dart has looked, he's looked pretty good, and they're in desperate need of like a wide receiver. So it's like, you got that Wan'Dale Robinson, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Jalen Hyatt, like that's not what you want. So Darius Slayton kind of slotting in. He's kind of had that role of being like more of just like a deep threat, but he might be utilized more as like in other areas of the field because I think, they need someone to throw the ball to. So he might be their true number 1 and be a steal off the waiver wire. Cam Scadaboo, maybe my favorite running back in the league at this point. I don't know how you can bench him at this point. Like the Eagles, honestly, they're giving up the 9th most points per game to running backs, which, the Eagles defense of late, they've been so dominant. And just a couple of weeks ago, Cam Scadaboo, I believe that was his 3 touchdown game. That was against the Eagles, right? Yeah, against Philly, he put up 30. Or he put up 19 for 98 and 3 touchdowns, and then 2 for 12 through the air. So he's not going to do that again. And the game in that game, it was a different game script where they were able to kind of set the tone on the ground, and they were winning that game. Whereas in this game, I could see the Eagles kind of bouncing back. But I think it'll be a somewhat competitive game, honestly. So I think, and even if the Giants aren't like winning, Cam Scadaboo is a great pass catcher. So no matter what, I don't know how you bench the guy. So the matchup still isn't my favorite in Philly, but he's still like a borderline running back 1 at this point. So yeah, it's pretty much maybe Dart. Scadaboo is pretty much a lock for me, and then Slayton is a stash, and that's pretty much it. Theo Johnson at tight end. He's had some big games. If you're desperate at the position, you can throw him in there and hope he has a big game. How did he do against the Eagles last time? 2 for 27. He's gotten in the end zone 3 of the last 4 weeks. The one game he didn't was against Philly. So he's a tight end too, but if you're desperate, or if you're in like a deeper league, I think you could do worse. So moving on to let's go Bears at Ravens. Ravens are 1-5, which is crazy to think. The Bears are 4-2. Obviously, the Ravens are a better team than 1-5, but they played some tough teams, and then they got just annihilated by injuries. And the big one here, in addition to their whole defense, having been hurt, Lamar Jackson at quarterback is out. So they're coming off the bye week. I think a lot of people thought their plan was to wait for the bye week and then have Lamar come back off of that, but he's listed as out with that hamstring injury. So that is a huge. I don't know, man. Like, they're 1-5 and they have Super Bowl aspirations. Like, if they lose this game, their season is pretty much done. So, I understand you don't want to rush a guy back, especially your franchise player, but that had to be a tough decision to not start him. So Tyler Huntley is actually going to get the start at quarterback for the Ravens. It had been Cooper Rush, and the offense did not look good with him. So Snoop Huntley is back in the building. That is not good for the offense, obviously, compared to the MVP winning Lamar Jackson. So that is a bit of a bummer, but against the Bears, we'll see how they play. I think they do have a chance to win this game. According to the DraftKings Sportsbook right now, where's that line? The Ravens are still 2.5-point home favorites. Over under is 45.5. So I think if anything, we might see Derrick Henry have a game here. The Bears are giving up the 11th most points to running backs on the year. Derrick Henry has been very disappointing after that week 1 game. He's had a couple games where I think one game against the Texans, he fell in the end zone that saved his day. And then was it last week? He actually had like a good rushing line. Yeah, he was 24 for 122 on the ground, and he added 1 for 8 through the air against the Rams in week 6. And then they had their bye week. So this is a good matchup, and they're going to need him. Traditionally or historically, Derrick Henry has been good when the Ravens, or whatever team he's on, the Titans or the Ravens, are winning the game, and they're not playing catch up. They're able to run the ball, ice the game in the fourth quarter, and the Ravens are 1-5. They haven't been able to do that. So my hope was that Lamar Jackson would come back, the offense would start clicking, and Derrick Henry would get a good game script in a good matchup to dominate. And he probably would have been my start of the week, because he's been so kind of disappointing that I think he's in that category now where he's not necessarily an auto start. But I would be starting him this week still as a running back 1. You just hope that the Bears don't get a lead where the Ravens they have to kind of play catch up and enter this hurry up pass heavy offense where Justice Hill is on the field more than Derrick Henry. But I'm still putting Henry out there as a running back 1, kind of like a low to mid running back 1. He's not, having Lamar not there still hurts, but I'm still looking to play him. Zay Flowers, not having Lamar, it hurts. It's not ideal. You can still start him. He's still a talented player, and he can still make big plays. Looks like the Bears are giving up the 9th most points to wide receivers. So to kind of running backs and receivers, they're a pretty good matchup. So he's sort of in that wide receiver 2 range for me, where you're probably starting him, but if you have a really good team, or if you're in like a 10-team league, maybe you don't have to. And then other than that, like, I'm not starting Andrews or Likely in this game with no Lamar. Andrews has been, very disappointing. Really a nothing for fantasy outside of week 3. He was 6 for 91 and 2 touchdowns against Detroit, and every other game he's been basically nothing. Isaiah Likely has been back at tight end, and he's also done nothing. Yeah, it looks like I'm reading this little blurb. It says he outsnapped Mark Andrews, but snaps don't get you fantasy points. He hasn't had more than 2 catches. So he came back in week 4, was 0 for 0 on 47% of snaps. Week 5, 1 for 12 on 1 target on 53% of snaps, and then 2 for 6 on 2 targets on 81% of snaps. So, if Mark Andrews gets traded, Lamar Jackson comes back, then maybe, that'll be more interesting. But until then, no thank you. And then for the Bears, even though Caleb Williams had a kind of a disappearing act last week, he is still a decent start. They were just kind of able to run the ball the whole game last week, and maybe they do that again, but they're on the road in Baltimore. I know they've been bad, but I think they might have to throw the ball a little bit more in this game. Plus, the Ravens' whole defense is kind of bad and decimated by injuries, so they can give it up on the ground and through the air. They're giving up the fourth most points to wide receivers, second most to running backs, and the second most to quarterbacks. So it's a great matchup for Caleb Williams and all these players. It's just kind of a thing of, who do we start? Because it's kind of a Chargers light situation where there's a lot of targets here. Who are the guys we want to play? Roschon Johnson at running back is out. He wasn't really a factor anyways, but DeAndre Swift is listed as questionable from what I'm seeing. We'll get into that in a little bit here. And then Cole Kmet at tight end is out. He's not playing against the Ravens here. So that's kind of a big note here. So the talented, highly drafted rookie tight end Colston Loveland, he was drafted 10th overall, really hasn't done anything for fantasy. He's someone that I'm not necessarily looking to start this week, but he's interesting to kind of maybe pick up and monitor and see how he performs with Cole Kmet out. I think Kmet should come back at some point, and they have so many other receiving options in this offense that, maybe even if he has a good game this week and or next week, it might not lead to long-term success, but they drafted him 10th overall. You think they'd want to get him more involved, and he really hasn't done anything. So I'm not looking to start any tight ends here. At wide receiver, I think the guy you want is Roma Dunze. He was really hot to start the year, and it's cooled off a little bit. He had that big 2 touchdown game against Detroit in week 2. That kind of really is what kind of made people be like, okay, this, he had a touchdown each of the first 4 weeks, at least one each of the first 4 weeks. And then they're bye in week 5. And then since then, he's had 2 catches each of the last 2 weeks, 2 for 32 and 2 for 31 since the bye, 5 and 6 targets respectively. So very disappointing. The matchups haven't been bad, so it's just it's troubling, but I think you still have to put him out there as a low wide receiver 1. Like, just with all the bye weeks there are this week, he still slots in as a low wide receiver 1. So I would still look to play him with all the bye weeks we have. Caleb Williams is a good start. If you don't have a locked in elite quarterback. DJ Moore, he's been really, really disappointing for fantasy. It's actually shocking. I feel like we've been hearing his whole career, no, he's actually so good. And he did have that one good year, but for the most part, it's been disappointing. And it's he's 28 now. His prime years aren't going to be here forever. And it's you have Ben Johnson, you have Caleb Williams, Roma Dunze is putting up production. And the way they're using him, it's just not good for fantasy. And I'm just surprised that Ben Johnson, this offensive mastermind, isn't finding a way to get him more involved, because all I've heard my whole life is, oh, this guy is so good. He's had a bad quarterback, or he's had a bad situation here or whatever. And he just it just hasn't, I don't know, it hasn't worked out in Chicago this year. So, yeah, he's been very disappointing. I'm not looking to start him. He had 68 yards in week 1. Since then, he hasn't cracked 50 yards. Yeah, so I would leave him on the bench if I could. He's still a wide receiver 3, I guess, at this point. But, him versus Tez Johnson with all the injuries in Tampa Bay is a real conversation you could have. So that's where we're at with DJ Moore. And then DeAndre Swift. He's listed as questionable. It's a little concerning. He practiced. He was limited on Thursday and Friday, listed as questionable. If he plays, I think he's a good play just because, the Ravens have been a good matchup for running backs, and he's been really good for fantasy. Like, he was someone that I was interested in like early in the offseason, and then I kind of got off that horse, and then I kind of wish I took him in a league or two because he was going pretty late, and he's been solid. He's a running back too this week. Monitor the news for injury reports, but since the bye week in week 6, he was 14 for 108, added 2 for 67 and a touchdown through the air, so he had a big reception there. And even without that, he still had a good game. And then last week in week 7, 19 for 124 and a touchdown, and then 1 for 14 through the air. So I don't know how you go away from that, assuming he's healthy. So just monitor the news with that. Because if he's active, I don't know how you get him out of your lineup at this point. Like he's a solid running back too. I wouldn't say he's a must start because where you drafted him, if you hit on your other running backs, maybe he's not a must start. But with injuries and bye weeks, I think how do you bench the guy? We're gonna move on here to the Bills. At the did I say their records? Yeah, Bears 4-2, Ravens 1-5. Buffalo Bills 4-2 at the Panthers 4-3. Where's the line here? I'm gonna guess that the Bills are favored. I have it pulled up here somewhere. Oh, here it is. 46.5 point over under. The Bills are 7-point road favorites. So the Bills, I believe, are coming off a bye. Is that a fact? Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's true. Let me check. Yep, they had a week 7 bye. So they had a week to prepare for the Panthers here. Joshua Palmer is out at receiver for the Bills, so maybe we get a little bit of consolidation of targets for Coleman and Khalil Shakir. We'll see. Another injury to monitor here is Dalton Kincaid. He's someone that I picked up in a league after he was dropped, thinking maybe I want to start this guy just with some injuries and bye weeks that I have going on. He's been really weird because he hasn't had the usage that you want, but he's still been great for fantasy just because he's found the end zone here and there. He's had a big play here and there where it's been working out. I could definitely see it going south, especially if he's like limited with an injury, but the Panthers are giving up the 5th most points to tight ends, and he's been good more often than not. So it really is a thing where you just kind of have to monitor the news and see if there's any reports that, he's going to be limited or anything. Obviously, if he doesn't play, don't play him, but be prepared to pivot in this matchup here. And what they play, they are a noon game, so you will have that clarity, before the noon game starts. So that is nice versus if it was like a later game and you had to worry about having a pivot option. So if he's, as long as he's active and good to go, I'm probably starting him as like a low tight end 1. Him versus Kelsey, it's kind of interesting. I'd probably go Kincaid. If it wasn't for the injury, I'd for sure go with Kincaid. That's the only thing holding me back from being more confident. So, like I was talking about Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir for the Bills. I still don't want to start either of them, just because they've been, very inconsistent. It's really hard to know like who is going to get production on this Buffalo Bills offense in the passing game, just because they spread it around, and no one is really a dominant like number 1. But Keon Coleman, you're kind of just hoping for a touchdown, and then Khalil Shakir is probably a little bit safer. I would lean Shakir, but neither are must starts by any means. I'd probably start Shakir. Him versus DJ Moore, I'd honestly probably start Shakir just because we've seen Khalil Shakir have a couple good games this year, whereas DJ Moore hasn't had that yet. So, but the matchup is better for DJ Moore. So hopefully, I actually in the Megala Bowl, if you guys listen to the Fantasy Footballers, that's an actual decision I have to make. I have Shakir and DJ Moore and like Brashard Smith and like all these like gross I literally added like 4 people off of waivers because my whole team is just like bad or injured. But the Panthers are giving up the 3rd fewest points to receivers. So the matchup could be better. And then for James Cook, it started hot. It slowed down a little bit here. He's still a running back 1, but surprisingly, the Panthers are giving up looks like the 24th most points per game to running backs. So what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 9th fewest points per game to running backs. So they've actually been pretty stingy. Huge improvement from last year where they were like historically bad against running backs. I'm still starting James Cook. Weeks 1 through 4, he was so good. I would have to assume he was the running back 1 or at least, top 2 or 3 without just checking. But weeks 5 and 6, he was like single digit points, no touchdowns. In weeks 1 through 4, he was very touchdown heavy, like 1, 2, 1, 1. Weeks 1 through 4, no touchdowns after that. His whole thing, heading into this year was, well, last year he had a huge touchdown season that hadn't been his thing. That was an outlier. This year he's going to regress and not score touchdowns. And to start the year, it looked like, oh, that was stupid. He's obviously going to score 1 million touchdowns. And I traded him in Dynasty and I regret it. For what amounted to James Conner and Caleb Johnson. So I would much rather have James Cook, especially because I'm in desperate need of players at this point. We're a very competitive Dynasty team. We got Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor, and I've lost a lot of pieces, but I digress. He's a running back 1. So we'll see how many touchdowns he scores by the end of the year, but you play him. And then obviously Josh Allen is a auto start each and every week. And then for the Carolina Panthers, the big injury here, Bryce Young at quarterback is doubtful. So it's looking like Andy Dalton is going to get the start. Honestly, that might be good for fantasy purposes for Ted McMillan. Xavier Legette at receiver also put up some production with Andy Dalton once he came into the game last week. So Bryce isn't officially out, but he's listed as doubtful, which pretty much means he's out. So Andy Dalton is he's maybe that'll help the offense. I don't know. I'm not looking to start Andy Dalton himself, but I'm hoping that, it sparks something with Ted McMillan because he clearly is a good player. It just hasn't really amounted to much for fantasy yet. Been very average, I'll say, in terms of actual production. But hoping for more. And he's been steady, but we'll see how Andy Dalton, where he throws the ball. Yeah, man. I wish Ted McMillan. I think if you can buy low on him in like a dynasty league, I think I would do that because the guy looks good, but it's just, he doesn't have the perfect situation right now. And then Xavier Legette, last week, he had a big game, 9 for 92 and a touchdown on 11 targets. I'm not really chasing that. If you want to add him to a bench in like a deeper league, I'm cool with that. And if you have him in Dynasty, that obviously, that gives you a little hope because it was looking pretty bleak there. He hasn't looked the most inspiring so far in his young career, but maybe like in a DFS lineup, you could throw him out there, but I'm still not looking to actually start him. He's more in that wide receiver 4 category. I will say though, in terms of like low players that I don't really want to start, he does have that upside just because he is kind of a bit of a physical freak. So, and then the big story here as well is the running back room. So you got Rico Dowdle and you got Chuba Hubbard. Let's actually pull up both their stats here. So Rico Dowdle, once Chuba Hubbard went down with an injury a few weeks back, Rico took over as the clear starter in week 5, and he went on an absolute tear where he like literally, I believe he was a running back 1 back-to-back weeks, 1 or 2. So week 5, he was 23 for 206 and a touchdown on the ground, 3 for 28 through the air, over 30 fantasy points, and then he put up over 30 fantasy points again. He actually had 30. So in week 5, he had 30.9, and then in week 6, he had 31.9. So he one-upped himself. 30 for 183 on the ground, and then 4 for 56 and a touchdown through the air. So just crazy production. And then Chuba Hubbard came back last week in week 7 against the Jets. And Rico Dowdle still saw 17 for 79 on the ground. So his carries did go down. He went from 23 to 30 to 17. Only one catch. He saw 2 targets, went from 4 to 5 to 2. And he was still great for fantasy, or, good, I'll say 10.1 points in half PPR. And then Chuba Hubbard was 14 for 31 on the ground, 2 for 24 through the air, 6.5 fantasy points. So both were very involved. At this point, I would slightly lean Rico. I think both are, low running back 2s. I would lean Rico just because we've seen that upside. And if anyone's going to have a big game, I think it would be Rico. But Chuba Hubbard, I think the team still likes him. They gave him a contract not that long ago. So I don't think the team is going to full bench him. And last week was his first game back. And it was basically a 50-50 split in terms of opportunities. I don't know if now that it's another week removed from the injury, is Chuba Hubbard going to reclaim more of the role where he's the leader? We just honestly don't know. But I think you can start both. I actually have a team where I have both. I currently have Rico Dowdle in there, and I actually have Tony Pollard of the Titans in there ahead of Chuba. So I've considered the idea of starting both, but then I'm like, well, if the Bills are crushing, I don't want to have both running backs for a team that's trailing the whole game in a bad game script, So plus, it's kind of risky to start both of them. But the Bills are giving up the 5th most points to running backs on the season, so do with that what you will. Maybe if they can keep the game competitive, it'll be good for fantasy. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the Bills and the Panthers. Moving on to the Cleveland Browns at the New England Patriots. Browns at 2-5, the Patriots at 5-2. This game is a 40.5 point over under. I believe that's the lowest of the week. Patriots are 7-point home favorites. Drake May is looking good, and the Browns are not necessarily looking the most good. So, for the Cleveland Browns, I don't know who you really want to start. I guess Quinshon Judkins obviously would be the number one guy that on that team you'd want to start. I will say, I believe the Patriots are a pretty tough matchup. Yeah, they're the 6th toughest matchup for running backs on the season. But Judkins is really good, and he's like their whole offense. So I would still start him as a low running back 1, high running back 2. I'm not starting any receivers for the Cleveland Browns. If David Njoku at tight end is out, you can start Harold Fannin Jr. at tight end. Njoku is questionable as of this recording. If they both play, they're just going to kind of cannibalize each other a little bit. So, I think you could still play Fannin if Njoku is active, especially if he is limited by an injury. But if they're both active, I think you could probably do better. But Fannin still slots in as like a borderline tight end 1, high tight end 2 if Njoku's out. And then obviously you're not starting like Dylan Gabriel at quarterback or anything crazy like that. And then on the Patriots side of things, Drake May is a great start most weeks. And he's entering like must start territory. I wouldn't say he's quite there, but he's been very good, like in all elements. He runs, he's a good passer, and he doesn't even really have like elite weapons yet. Granted, their schedule hasn't been super tough, but yeah, if you can get him like a true number 1 receiver, like he's looking really good. So if you're a Patriots fan, to go from Tom Brady to Drake May, it doesn't really get better than that. So the Browns are giving up the 3rd fewest points to quarterbacks. I still like Drake May as a mid quarterback 1 this week. And then at running back, the Travion Henderson thing, it's just not happening. So you really can't start him at this point until we see some usage. Ramondre Stevenson is startable. It's been pretty ugly, and this is a tough matchup. The Browns are giving up the 2nd fewest points per game to running backs on the season, but he is the clear lead back there. He gets goal line opportunities, and there's a lot of bye weeks. So he's still in that running back 2 category for me. And then at wide receiver, I guess my number 1 option would be Stephon Diggs. He actually probably slots in as like a wide receiver 2 this week, just with all the bye weeks. The Browns are more susceptible through the air than the ground, although they're more middle of the pack against, receivers. It's not like they're a good matchup necessarily. But Diggs is playable in that wide receiver 2 range. If you want to chase Kayshon Boutte, you can. He'll give you a play here and there. And he's flashed at times. The usage isn't always there and the targets, but he can get in the end zone. He can make big plays. So he's more of a wide receiver 4, low wide receiver 3, high to mid wide receiver 4. So if you're in a deeper league, or if you got a lot of injuries, a lot of bye weeks, then maybe that's something you could do. And then Hunter Henry at tight end, he's someone you can throw in your lineup and hope for a touchdown. He had a stretch there where he was really hot. Like weeks 3 and 4, he was looking good, got in the end zone, and then it's been pretty cold since then. So he's still a tight end 2 for me, like a high tight end 2, but you're really just hoping for a touchdown. So those teams are pretty easy. And again, it's a low over under, so they're expecting this game to not be super exciting for fantasy. Let's move on. Speaking of exciting, the 0-7 Jets traveling to take on the 3-4 Cincinnati Bengals. 44.5 point over under. The Bengals are 6-point home favorites. And it looks like Justin Fields is going to start. Also, I don't know why I just thought of this now. Weather-wise, we're looking pretty good weather-wise for fantasy this week. Just really touching on a few games I mentioned. In terms of outdoor stadiums, the only game that we've talked about so far that has some weather that I'm seeing is Carolina Panthers. Slight chance of rain. That's really not a big deal. So I should have mentioned that earlier, but and then it looks like that Chiefs game on Monday night has a chance of rain showers, but nothing crazy this week. No major wind. So anyways, back to what I was saying. Justin Fields is going to get the start for the Jets. It looked like maybe they were going to go with Tyrod Taylor, but he's out. He's injured. So Justin Fields gets another shot to start. My start of the week, Breece Hall is questionable with that knee injury. He's expected to play, and if he plays, I think he's still a good start, even though it's been rough. Sauce Gardner is out. Garrett Wilson at wide receiver is out. Braylon Allen at running back is still out. So the Jets are very shorthanded. Mason Taylor at tight end is questionable, expected to play. Yeah, so it could be ugly for the Jets. But I guess just starting with the Jets side of things, I think you can start Justin Fields if you're desperate. So we've seen this year like a very, very high upside games and then the lowest of the low downside, like 30 plus points, low single digits, like going back and forth. So it's a risky start. If you're like a big underdog, you can maybe start him. The Bengals are giving up the 9th most points per game to quarterbacks, and their offense has looked good lately. So maybe, the Bengals are winning early and the Jets have to kind of, play catch up, and Justin Fields gets some garbage time and gets some rushing in. Because really his rushing is his superpower, but he's still more of a like quarterback 2, maybe a low quarterback 1. Like, would you rather play him or Jordan Love? Jordan Love is safer. Fields probably has more upside if you're an underdog. Caleb Williams, Jackson Dart at that tier, that's a real decision. Joe Flacco in that same game is probably a slightly better start, but if you told me Fields was better, I wouldn't be shocked. Aaron Rodgers in a revenge game versus the Packers, that's also intriguing. So it's a scary proposition putting Justin Fields out there, but he runs, so he could always put up fantasy production. So if you can play him. Breece Hall, start of the week. Garrett Wilson is out, so there's no receivers you want to play for the Jets. And it's really just like if Mason Taylor is active, which it looks like he should be, he's like a low tight end 1, high tight end 2. And then that's pretty much it for the Jets. And then for the Bengals, Joe Flacco's a decent start. Like I said, he's like a, streaming option, like high quarterback 2 with all the bye weeks. And then Chase Brown, he was almost my start of the week. I almost started him. I went with Jordan Addison, like I said earlier in the video. But with Joe Flacco there in Cincinnati, the offense has looked a little bit better. And, Chase Brown, I was very high on him in the offseason, and the Burrow injury really cooked any chances of elite upside. He's looked inefficient, but there's hope. Last week against the Steelers, he was 11 for 108 on the ground, had 4 targets, caught 2 of them for -8 yards, so you don't like that, but it was good to see him get some chunk plays. Now, he did only have 11 carries still. That was kind of a back and forth shootout between the elder statesmen, Joe Flacco and Aaron Rodgers. But he's a decent start, and the Jets are an okay matchup for running backs. I believe they're pretty middle of the pack. Yeah, they're like middle of the pack against running backs, but you can start Chase Brown as a running back 2 this week. I've said it a million times, but with all the bye weeks, it just raises everyone else up. So he's in that running back 2 range. There's still guys I would rather play over him. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are, Jamar Chase has been saved by Joe Flacco coming into town, and he's put up some big games with Flacco. And with no Sauce Gardner for the Jets, he has a chance to do it again. The last 3 weeks, starting from week 5 on, 6 for 110 and 2 touchdowns, 10 for 94 and 1 touchdown, 16 for 161 and 1 touchdown. He had 23 targets that game. So he's an auto start. And then Higgins, it looked like he was maybe going to be left for dead, but with Joe Flacco there, he actually has some hope. He's been pretty decent with Joe Flacco. In the last couple of weeks, 5 for 62, 6 for 96 and a touchdown. You can play him. He's in that wide receiver 2 range. And then that's about it. So that game is pretty easy. Moving on to the Dolphins at the Falcons. Dolphins are 1-6. Falcons are 3-3. It's looking like Michael Penix is going to be out for this game. So Kirk Cousins is likely going to get the start as of this recording. 44.5 point over under. Even without their starting quarterback, the Falcons are 7-point home favorites. And I'm excited to see Kirk Cousins go out there and play. I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan, so I have a special place in my heart for Kirk Cousins. The big injury addition late in the week was Drake London at wide receiver. He's listed as questionable with a hip injury. I think if he plays, you just kind of have to play him as a wide receiver 1, but definitely monitor the news. I mean, it's possible he gets listed as out. He got added very late in the week to the injury report. So we really don't have a ton of info on that. I think if he's active, you're probably forced to play him. And unless you hear like, oh, he's going to be severely limited or he's out, I wouldn't really be looking to go away from him. And then Kirk Cousins himself, like in a DFS lineup or a really deep league, he's like a quarterback 2, but probably not looking to start him. And then at tight end for the Falcons, Kyle Pitts has actually sneakily been pretty good. And I don't know what the deal is with Drake London. If he's limited or out, that gives a bump to Kyle Pitts, he's kind of just a consistent, like low to mid tight end 1 at this point. And, that's kind of honestly, we were hoping he'd be like a Rob Gronkowski elite Jimmy Graham guy, and maybe he still will. But for where we were, especially people who got him in Dynasty, like I'm pretty chill with what he's been doing this year. Last week, he saw 10 targets, turned into 7 for 62. So he's actually looked pretty okay for fantasy this season. So I'm very happy for that. And then Darnell Mooney at receiver. If Drake London is listed as out, then maybe I'm a little more interested in Mooney, but otherwise he's more of like a wide receiver 3, high wide receiver 4. And then obviously Bijan Robinson, you're starting Bijan each and every week, every day of the week. Tyler Algier, the backup running back, is listed as questionable. I don't know what his chances are of really missing. I'm not seeing a ton here in this blurb I'm looking at, so I'm not really sure, but it's the Bijan Robinson show anyways. And then for the Dolphins, obviously Tyreek Hill is still gone. He's out for the year at receiver. They just lost Darren Waller to injured reserve. He's expected to come back this year, but he'll miss at least 4 games. And then Julian Hill, another tight end you probably have never heard of. He's been ruled out. So they're pretty low on tight ends in Miami. Tua is going to get the start at quarterback again, but he's looked really bad lately. So I'm not looking to start him. It's pretty much Devon Achane at running back and Jalen Waddle at wide receiver. Achane is just money right now. Even if the offense is terrible, he PPRs his way to success. Jalen Waddle with no Tyreek Hill, he gets a bump there. He's in wide receiver 2 range. Last week was really bad. Remember, that was a very kind of crazy weather game, and Tua just looked terrible. So I'd still be willing to go back to him this week with no Tyreek Hill. You can still start him. The Falcons do give up the second fewest points to receivers, but again, with all the bye weeks, Waddle's still in that wide receiver 2 range. And then kind of a sleeper option would be Malik Washington, just with no Darren Waller, no Tyreek Hill. I'm not looking to start him, but like I have him in a dynasty league. I'm excited to see what he does. He's been like pretty involved target wise, just hasn't done anything at all with them. Like last week he saw 8 targets turned into 5 for 30. So, but he's an athletic guy, and if he gets an opportunity, maybe he does something with it. But it's the only one I'm really excited to start this week, honestly, is Devon Achane, and then maybe Waddle if you aren't stacked at receiver. And then yeah, we'll move on to the New Orleans Saints at 1-6, hosting the Tampa Bay Bucks at 5-2. The Bucks looked pretty bad in that game against the Detroit Lions. I think Baker's kind of dealing with a bit of an injury, if I'm being honest. But he's still someone that you're probably playing. But the Bucks are 4.5 point road favorites. Over under is 46.5 points. They're going to be without the Bucks are going to be without Mike Evans, so he came back and then got hurt right away. Going to miss most of the season. It looks like with a broken collarbone. He's on my dynasty team. That's great. So is Tyreek Hill. That's great. Mike Evans, no Mike Evans, no Chris Godwin, no Bucky Irving still at running back. Jalen McMillan is still out. So their receiver room is looking a little bleak. So Rashad White is going to get the start at running back. He's a good start just because, he's never been an efficient runner, but he PPRs his way to fantasy goodness. So he's honestly in that low running back 1 range. And he should have more success against the Lions. Just the Bucks just got shut down against Detroit. I think they're going to bounce back, even if Baker is dealing with a bit of an injury. I think they'll bounce back pretty well against the Saints. They're getting up the 12th most points to running backs, so not like a crazy good matchup, but it's good enough where you're probably starting Rashad White in most scenarios. I almost said Emeka Egbugbue. That's kind of just what his name is to me. Shout out Gronk. He's going to be so necessary with all these injuries, with no Godwin, no Mike Evans. And he's looked great as a rookie. So he was dealing with his own injury, but he came back. He actually didn't even miss a game. It looked like he might miss last week, but he came back. He came in and played. Saw 12 targets, only turned into 4 for 58. Baker Mayfield was missing a lot of throws in that game. And there could have been way more fantasy goodness there, but I'm going right back to Egbuka as a must-start wide receiver 1, honestly, at this point. If you want to take a shot on another guy on the offense, I'd probably go Tez Johnson. He's a really little receiver, but he's flashed with an increase in opportunity this year. And last week against Detroit, 4 for 58 and a touchdown. The week before, 1 for 45 and a touchdown, only 1 catch, but it was a big one. And then the week before that, 4 for 59 and a touchdown. So he's more necessary with all these injuries, and he's it's more of a short-term play until Godwin comes back, but I think you can flex him in a pinch. I would play him over Sterling Shepard, just a little more upside. And the key factor here is I did drop Tez Johnson in Dynasty before the season. We have like expanded rosters, so I just picked up a bunch of like undrafted people from our rookie draft, and then I didn't have room once we cut down rosters. Because he was like the wide receiver 5, 4, 5, 6. So since I cut him in Dynasty, he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer. So do with that what you will. And then K. Dotton at tight end, he was almost my start of the week. He's been more involved lately just with all these injuries. Very necessary to the offense. So he's a low tight end 1 streaming option that you can put in there. The last few weeks, like last week, 7 for 65 on 9 targets. The week before that, 5 for 51 on 6 targets. The week before that, 4 for 81 on 5 targets. And everything before that was like nothing. But week 5 on, he's been putting in, pretty decent work for a guy you can get off waivers. So I think that's about it for that game. There might be thunderstorms, but it's in a dome. So that's the benefit of not playing outside sometimes. Denver Broncos hosting the Dallas Cowboys. Broncos are 5-2. Cowboys are 3-1 with that tie with the Packers earlier on. Like I said, 50.5 point over under. Broncos are 3.5 point home favorites. I kind of talked about this game a little bit already, just with my starts of the week, but the Cowboys offense is great and their defense is terrible. So what does that mean? A lot of fantasy goodness. So looking at the Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott has been on fire. He was my guy heading into the season, and I'm still very cool starting him in this matchup. Now, the Denver Broncos are a tougher defense. They're giving up the 4th fewest points per game to quarterbacks. I don't super care. It does nerf his upside a little bit, but he's still a low to mid quarterback 1 for me this week. Javonte Williams at running back, the revenge game against the Broncos. I'm firing him up as well. Again, it's not the easiest matchup, but I think you're probably starting him as a low running back 1 still. And then CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens, both of those receivers. CeeDee Lamb is a must start each and every week. And George Pickens, even with CeeDee Lamb back, I think you're still very happy to start him. Both are wide receiver 1s, honestly. Pickens is more of a low wide receiver 1, high wide receiver 2. But I'm putting them both in the lineup. And then Jake Ferguson at tight end, he's been so money. I thought about sending a trade offer for him in Dynasty before the season, and I wish I had. He's entering, must start territory at this point. So the Broncos do give up the fewest points per game to receivers. You're still starting both of those receivers. And yeah, the Cowboys offense is easy. So those are the guys you're starting. And then for the Broncos, Bo Nix, my start of the week. I'd fire him up as a quarterback 1. Him versus Dak itself is a very intriguing question. Dak has been the better player. Bo Nix has the better matchup technically. So that's really tough for me, man. Like, if you have Dak, I have a league where I have both of these guys. I believe I have Bo Nix in there right now, but it's very close. It's just such a good matchup with the Cowboys. It really is. It really, really is. And Patrick Surtain is there to kind of. The Broncos defense has been stingy against cornerback or against receivers, but even if Surtain somehow like shuts down, CeeDee Lamb or Pickens or whoever he's covering, probably Lamb, they have the weapons where I don't think it's going to matter. So that's a really tough call. J.K. Dobbins at running back for the Broncos is a good start. Like I said, the Cowboys defense is bad, so Dobbins, you can put him in there like a high running back 2. Courtland Sutton was my start of the week at wide receiver. So I'm firing up as a mid wide receiver 1. And then if you want to take a shot on Troy Franklin or Marvin Mims, this is a decent week to do it. They're both, I'd probably lean Troy Franklin as like a wide receiver 3, like low wide receiver 3. But if you want to put Mims in there, if you're feeling crazy, you can do that. Last week, Mims was 6 for 85, played 53% of the snaps. I'm not looking to start any of these guys, but DFS, deep leagues, maybe how did Troy Franklin do last week? He was 3 for 19 and a touchdown, had 10 targets, played 62% of the snaps. So one of those guys at least will probably be decent. And then Evan Ingram, he's showing a little bit of life here. After doing nothing to start the year. Last week, 8 targets, only turned into 5 for 42, but that's kind of what Evan Ingram does. He's actually been 5 for 42 in back-to-back weeks. The week before that, 4 for 33 and a touchdown. So he's entering that tight end 2 category, and it's against the Cowboys defense. So we always want to target the Dallas Cowboys defense. Like, it's just kind of the rule of fantasy this season. So lots of good opportunities there on both sides of the ball. We're going to move on to, actually, let me hold on for one sec. Yeah, the Cowboys are giving up most points to quarterbacks, 6th most points to running backs, most to receivers, and then at tight end, they're 12. So they're a good matchup. Anyways, moving on. Tennessee Titans 1-6 at Indianapolis Colts 6-1. 48.5 point over under. The Colts are 14.5 point home favorites, which is crazy. So Cam Ward, the number 1 overall pick quarterback for the Titans, has looked really bad. No Calvin Ridley at receiver in this game. So they're super shorthanded. They're missing 1 receiver, so I don't want to say they're super shorthanded, but they don't have a lot of hands to begin with. So Tony Pollard is startable, just because he gets work. It's just there's just not a lot of upside there. Unfortunately, Colts are giving up the looks like the 5th fewest points to running backs. There's no threat in the passing game. So Tony Pollard, he could volume his way to decent production, could fall in the end zone if they're able to score a touchdown at all. But he's like a running back 3, honestly, at this point, even with all these bye weeks. So it's really unfortunate. Tough matchup. If you're going to start a receiver, I guess it would be Alec Iamaner. He's in that wide receiver 4 range, honestly. Chimera DK, he's kind of made a play here and there, but he's even, further down than that. So it's pretty much maybe Tony Pollard. And then honestly, that's about it. So it's pretty bad in Tennessee right now. And then for the Colts, oh baby. So Jonathan Taylor might set the world record for fantasy points. They're going to have a good game script. He's been so good. The Titans are giving up the 4th most points per game to running backs. He's probably my favorite play of the week in the entire slate. It's pretty crazy. Bijan is obviously in a great spot too. So, and Jamar Chase with no Sauce Gardner is kind of crazy. Danny Dimes at quarterback, he's been really good, and I think you can go right back to him. He might not be needed to do a ton, just if they're dominating, but he runs. He's been great, so he's a quarterback 1. And then if you're starting receiver for the Colts, Pittman is the guy you're looking for. He's in that wide receiver 2 range. He's been really good. He's kind of forgotten for fantasy, and he's been really solid this year. The Titans are giving up. They're not a great matchup for quarterbacks, but I think it's because teams don't really need to do much against them. They're kind of middle of the pack against receivers. 13th most points allowed to receivers, it looks like. So I'm still cool starting, Pittman. And then Josh Downs has been a little disappointing. He's more of a wide receiver 4 at this point. Last week he was 6 for 42 and a touchdown. The week before that, 6 for 54, but it's been not great. But honestly, a guy that I'd probably play over Josh Downs is Alec Pierce. He's been low-key a little bit better. I have to start him in my Dynasty League, and hopefully Drake London plays, because if he's out, I have to reach for another scrub. But Alec Pierce has he's had some games this year, and last week he saw 10 targets against the Chargers, turned into 5 for 98. So, and then obviously Tyler Warren at tight end. He's a must start each and every week. So he's been great. That's pretty much it for that game. Moving on, we're almost through all the games here. We got the Green Bay Packers Sunday Night Football at 4-1-1, traveling to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers at 4-2. We got the revenge game for Aaron Rodgers. I think Rodgers is going to have a good game here. I really do. I think the team. I think he wants to put up a good performance against his old team, and I think the Steelers are willing to let him do that. So I'd be willing to play Rodgers if if you're in a 2 quarterback league, or for whatever reason you're kind of desperate. He's still a quarterback 2 for me this week, but he's I don't know. I think the revenge game narrative means something here, and the Packers are middle of the pack against quarterbacks. It's in Pittsburgh, so other than that, Jaylen Warren is a great start at running back. He's been really solid for fantasy each and every week. The Packers are stingy against the run, giving up the 4th fewest points to running backs on the season, but he's involved in the passing game, on the ground, and he's pretty much their lead back. So he's in that wide receiver 2 territory for me, and he just seems to almost always find a way to be in double digits. So outside of his, after the bye week, he came back from injury, took on the Cleveland Browns, who are the toughest matchup for running backs. Like second, I think they give it the second fewest points, and he was not great in that game. 11 for 52 on the ground, 2 for 11 through the air, but against Cincinnati, he bounced back, 16 for 127, 4 for 31 through the air on 5 targets. So Warren is a good start, even in a tough matchup. And DK Metcalf, man, it's been very disappointing. I was very excited for him. And I actually benched him in one of my leagues in that game where he had that long touchdown against the Vikings. And in the end, it wasn't really as bad for me as I thought, because he had that 80-yard breakaway slant where he just took off. But he really didn't do much else in that game after early on. And outside of getting in the end zone, it's been a little rough. It's not been as, great as we hoped for fantasy, in my opinion. He's the number 1 receiver, but he's just not commanding targets. And this team doesn't throw the ball a ton, so all in all, he's kind of touchdown dependent at this point. So he's still in that low wide receiver 1, high wide receiver 2 range, where you're probably starting him. The Packers are middle of the pack against receivers, but I'm not excited to start him, but I am starting him. And if Rodgers throws a touchdown, there's a good chance that it goes to Metcalf. So I'm starting him. I think he'll probably be pretty good, but that's about it. Calvin Austin, if you're really desperate, he's been missing time, but he's back. He's one of those guys on my dynasty team. Him and Malik Washington are guys I might have to throw in there if Drake London is out, but I'm not going to be happy to do it. And then for the Green Bay Packers, it's looking like they might get Christian Watson back. Dontavian Wicks at wide receiver is out. And then wide receiver Matthew Golden, the rookie, is listed as questionable. So we'll kind of see what the receiver room looks like, but that bodes well for my start of the week, Tucker Kraft. Start him at tight end. And then Romeo Doubs, he's the only guy that's really locked in, with Golden questionable. Christian Watson, his first game back. He's always injury prone as it is. I'm not really excited to start any of those receivers. Romeo Doubs is the guy I would want to start as a high wide receiver 3, low wide receiver 2, I guess, with the bye weeks. Christian Watson, you can put him out there, but let me rephrase that. Don't start him yet. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. DFS, you want to take a dart throw, sure, if you're in a Sunday night thing, but I would stash him. If he's out there, you can stash him and see how he looks, because this team is in need of another weapon. So, and then Jordan Love at quarterback, he's been very mid, very underwhelming for fantasy. For NFL wise, he's a good quarterback. He just hasn't really had to do much. But the Steelers are giving up the 4th most points per game to quarterbacks, and if Aaron Rodgers can put up points and force the Packers to have to score, maybe we see something on the Jordan Love. But it really has been the Josh Jacobs show in Green Bay. He's a great start each and every week. So obviously you're starting him. And yeah, the Steelers are a good matchup for quarterbacks and receivers, giving up the 6th most points to receivers. But who do you play at receiver? And do you trust Jordan Love? if you don't have a better option, then maybe. But yeah, the Steelers are giving up the third most points per game to tight ends. Love that for Tucker Kraft. And then finally, on to the last game, Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Washington Commanders. Like I said, chance of rain showers. Doesn't look like anything too crazy. Doesn't look like crazy wind. Obviously, monitor the news. But as of now, it's looking like it shouldn't be nuts. And did I say who's the favorite in that game? By the way, the Packers are 3-point road favorites, 45.5 point over under. I don't think I said that. And now moving on to the next game, Commanders at Chiefs. Chiefs are 11.5 point home favorites, 47.5 point over under. So Jaden Daniels is out for fantasy. Very unfortunate. Gonna miss some more time after coming back with an injury. Washington is getting their top two receivers back, Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel. So that is great. I'm willing to start either of those guys. The Chiefs are not a great matchup for receivers, giving up the fourth fewest points to receivers on the season, points per game. In Kansas City, with a backup quarterback, Marcus Mariota. Now, as far as backups go, Mariota is pretty decent. I'm probably not looking to start Mariota again, unless you're in like a 2 quarterback league or very desperate at the position, just because of the matchup. Like the Chiefs are pretty brutal, giving up the 5th fewest points to quarterbacks. So I'm fine starting Deebo and McLaurin, but expectations might have to be limited. Deebo is in that low wide receiver 2 range. We hope he's healthy, gets involved on the ground a little bit. And then Terry McLaurin, I probably like a little bit less than Deebo, just because McLaurin hasn't looked great this year. He was holding out in the offseason. Maybe that has something to do with it, but he hasn't played since week 3. So let's just hope he's healthy. And if you have him, you're probably putting him back in the lineup, but you've been living life without him, so maybe not. And then honestly, Zach Ertz, again, it's a tough matchup for pretty much everyone on the Commanders. Chiefs are giving up the 4th fewest points per game to tight ends, but if they're losing and they're playing catch up, there might be opportunities here. You can play Ertz. It's not a great week to stream him, but he's always someone you can put in there, and he sometimes finds a way to just put up fantasy points. And then Bill Krosky-Merritt at running back is the guy you want for the Commanders. The Chiefs are tough against running backs. They give up the 7th fewest points per game to running backs on the year. And, Bill did not do well against the Bears 2 weeks ago. He didn't do well against the Cowboys. The week before that against the Chargers, he was good. But 2 money matchups against the Bears and the Cowboys as the lead back, and really, really disappointing. And now he gets the Chiefs on the road. So you never know. Fantasy's weird, but you can start him, but he's more of a, honestly, like a low running back 2, borderline running back 3 at this point. And then finally, we'll move on to the Chiefs here. They're rolling right now. They're looking good. So that's great. They are dealing with some injuries here. Josh Simmons, left tackle, listed as out. Trey Smith listed as doubtful at right guard. I still think the offense is going to roll. Mahomes has just looked really good. I believe he's the favorite for MVP. And it's an exploitable defense. So Mahomes is a must start. And then Rashee Rice back from injury. He didn't play a ton of snaps, but he was very involved on the snaps that he did play. And he only played 41% of the snaps, and he saw 10 targets, turned into 7 for 42 and a touchdown. So he's a must start. He's the guy. Xavier Worthy at receiver. It's been a little slow lately, but you can start him. Hope for a big play. He's more of a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Hope for upside. And then Travis Kelce with Rashee Rice coming back last week. Kelce saw 3 targets. Played 62% of the snaps. That's his lowest of the season, according to Fantasy Pros. 3 for 54. So he's still playable just because tight end is icky, but he's not a must start by any means. He's still in that tight end 1 range just because the position is gross, but I'd probably play Dallas Goedert over him. Him versus Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, that's a real conversation. And then at running back, it's gross. So is Kareem Hunt good to go? Okay, I thought maybe it looked like he was going to be. He's expected to play. So Pacheco is probably the guy you want. He's in the low running back 2 range. Last week he was 15 for 57 and a touchdown. So you're pretty much just hoping he falls in the end zone, which he very well could do in this game. It's a gross running back room. Kareem Hunt, though, has kind of, it seems like, fallen out of favor. Last week, only 4 for 18 on the ground. One name I want to bring up is Brashard Smith. I would rather play him over Kareem Hunt. I believe he's a rookie. I think he was drafted in like the 7th round or something. He's another guy on my dynasty team that I dropped also. So he gets the bump there. Yeah, 7th round pick. He's more of like a scat back, like a kind of like I don't know how you explain him. He might have a pass catching role. Okay. Last week, he actually had 14 carries for 39 yards, and he had 5 targets turned into 5 for 42. So I think you can flex him this week. He's in that running back 3 range, but if he gets more work than we're expecting, maybe you want to be a week early, at least on rostering him, than a week late. You don't have to play him by any means, but if you're desperate with bye weeks and stuff, like I have one league where I'm probably going to play him. And I wish I still had him in my dynasty league because he's someone that I would consider playing with all these bye weeks and injuries I have. So those are all the matchups for the week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. As always, remember to drop a like and follow or subscribe wherever you are enjoying the podcast to become a fantasy football prodigy. I will see you on the next one. Good luck to everyone except for your opponents. Peace.